finally made it. You signed a contract and are ready to begin your teaching career. So what now? This video will take you through some of the best research-based practices for teachers and make sure you get your year off to a great start. All the ideas from this video are taken from the book Learner-Centered Teaching, Putting the Research on Learning into Practice by Terry Doyle. For many years, a successful teacher was thought of as someone who could give great lectures and really capture the attention of their audience. In reality, for real learning to take place, the roles must be reversed. Consider this scenario. A college professor spends 8 hours searching for research, content, and resources for his students. Then he comes in and presents his findings in a 2-hour class. In this scenario, who is doing all the learning? The professor. He is doing all the work, so he is doing all the learning. We must put the responsibility for learning back into the hands of our students. A really successful teacher is one who lets the students do the majority of the work, which then allows the students to do the majority of the learning. In order for real learning to take place, our students must be actively engaged in the learning. This can't happen in a passive lecture-style classroom, where a student just sits and listens to a lecture for 2 hours. How many of you will admit that it is hard to pay attention and keep your focus during one of those long lectures? Of course it is. We doodle on our notes or make to-do lists in our notebooks, and we are anything but engaged. Even though we know this style isn't giving us the results we want, we still continue to give long lectures and create passive students. The question is, why? We must make our students active participants in their own learning. One important concept all teachers should know is that we must give more control back to the students. If we are always choosing the assignments and projects the students are doing in class, the students have no ownership in their learning. Learning is not as meaningful to the students as it would have been if we allowed them to make decisions about their own learning. By putting them in control of classroom decisions, the students feel more ownership of the learning and are more engaged with the content. We can give the students more ownership of the class by allowing them to make choices. They can be involved in course policies, grading, organizational issues, and even project deadline. Allowing the students to be involved in these issues creates a sense of responsibility. For instance, if the students are involved in making decisions about project deadlines, they cannot complain to the professor if their projects are not completed on time. One way you can offer more choice is by creating multiple ways to complete a task. This allows the students to use their creativity and talents to complete a project in a way that suits them best. It also motivates the students to create higher quality projects. Allow your students to shine by doing what they do best. If you really want to have a successful classroom, the key is to get the teacher talking less and the students talking more. From the very beginning of this lesson, we said that the person who does the work does the learning. That being said, in most classrooms, the teacher does the majority of the talking. Where does this leave our students? For real learning to take place, our students must be engaging in authentic discussions on a regular basis. A quiet classroom is not a learning classroom. In many classrooms, the teacher poses a question to the students and then waits for a response. If the students don't answer quickly enough, the teacher gives a response for them. We have trained a generation of students to react passively to discussion in the classroom. In a real, learner-centered classroom, the teacher learns how to remain silent and therefore forces the students to engage in active discussion. They are forced to problem solve, evaluate, and apply the material on their own, and therefore their learning is greatly extended. As teachers, we often spend hours upon hours preparing beautiful presentations for our students, just to see them yawning at their desks. If we want real learning to occur, we must allow our students to discover some of these great concepts on their own. We must teach them to be independent learners, learners who understand how to problem solve, collaborate, communicate, and learn. Sometimes we just have to let go of the reins and let our students show us what they can do. One thing we know about learning is it must be meaningful to students and have real-world application. How many times have you ever asked a teacher, "When will I ever use this after I graduate?" Using activities with meaningful, real-world applications allows your students to see the importance of what they are learning. When planning your lessons, the first thing you must do is start with a goal. So many times, teachers plan activities but don't really have an actual learning goal they are trying to reach. Before you do any lesson planning, you must first define what you want your students to do and how you want them to do it. This allows you to then plan lessons and activities that are authentic, engaging, and produce a desired outcome. In order for the students to really show mastery of a concept, they must have time to practice. This needs to be built into our lessons every day. Students will not remember something you did one time, then never did again. They must use the material many times in a variety of situations if you really want to see it stick. If we are going to have an engaged, enthusiastic classroom, the most important thing we need to do is get to know our students. If we know our students, we will be able to adapt our teaching to better fit their needs and talents. We must connect with students on an emotional level. If students hate coming to class, they probably are not going to learn very much. If they are coming into an enjoyable, engaging atmosphere that is full of trust and mutual respect, they are more likely to be active learners. In order to have a successful learning environment, you need to have a good relationship with your students. The students need to know they can trust you and that you have their best interests at heart. Then, when they come to a difficult task, they are not as stressed out because they know you will be there to help them and guide them as necessary. Having a good relationship also allows you to give feedback in a non-threatening way because the students know you just want them to succeed. Research has found that learning is affected directly by a student's mindset about their own intelligence. Some students feel that they don't need to study very hard because they are intelligent enough to make the grade without it. This often leads to students missing out on significant long-term learning because they lack good study habits. Intelligence is not a fixed thing. It can be enhanced by effort and practice. In order to be an effective teacher, we have to teach our students what true learning is and expose bad learning habits for what they really are. How do we learn? We learn about the world by listening, seeing, tasting, smelling, and touching it. In the average classroom, only 2 of these sentences are often used, listening and seeing. Research has found that students learning in a multi-sensory environment recall more information and keep that information for longer periods of time. Why then are we still teaching students with a lecture-only style? In order to see increased learning in our classrooms, we must engage all the senses in meaningful ways. With the amount of technology available today, more and more teachers are using multimedia presentations to engage their students at a greater level. In order for it to be truly effective, however, it must be done correctly. Too much information at once can overload a student and block learning. Simple words and pictures or direct animations with narration are much better than complex slides with too much information. Using technology tools can make classwork fun and exciting, but make sure you are using it in the right ways. Our brains are constantly looking for patterns in the world around us every day. When we learn new concepts, our brain automatically wants to process that information based on patterns it has learned in the past. To have an effective learner-centered classroom, we must learn how to use patterns in the organization and categorization of the content we teach. We often use this kind of organization in our own planning, but often fail to share these tools with our students. When we are learning new material, we are essentially connecting that information with our prior knowledge. Using patterns in the classroom is all about making connections. One of the things that we know about the brain is that in order for it to retain a bit of information, we must be paying attention. We see millions of things every day, and most of those things are filtered out by the brain. In order for the brain to retain information, it must be paying attention to whatever you're trying to remember. People who are constantly trying to multitask are switching their attention so much they are not likely to retain anything they are doing. If we want our students to learn better, we must get them focused on the task. The brain and the body are not separate entities. They work together. When a person exercises, the brain actually produces more of the chemicals that increase our focus in learning. When we do not exercise, we are actually depriving our brain of those essential chemicals, and this can greatly hinder how we are processing information. When we get our blood pumping, chemicals are released that actually generate new neurons in the brain. So why do we have our students sitting in chairs in our classroom all day long? You can have a successful classroom this year, a classroom that is engaged, excited, and learning at optimal levels. By using the research-based practices shown in this video, you can be sure your students will be learning more than ever before.